Okay, so one of the first questions that a lot of young people ask when people get acquired is, how did you celebrate? What did you do the day you signed the document? In Silicon Valley, we have a tradition that some people go and eat burgers that cost $1,000 each. What did you do?
Well, the very first thing I did was I called both of my parents. I just called my mom, called my dad, told them. It was funny because I had this incredibly high level of excitement, and my parents had no idea what had just happened, and there was really no way to communicate it to them. Since then, startups have become more popular. They're more a part of the zeitgeist with movies like the Facebook movie. I forget what that was called. The Social Network. Thank you. So now, if somebody completely non-technical or older, like a grandparent, asks me what I do, I say, go watch that movie. All of that except the crazy, weird college parties. I do all that other stuff. But yeah, so it took a little bit of explaining, and my mom was like, oh, that's really nice, honey, congratulations. And that was a bit of a letdown. After that, I don't remember. I think I went to dinner at a nice place. That was it. Sorry if that's a letdown.
So the first thing that we had to keep it under wraps for like a month and a half while the lawyers were coming through the work, and we didn't want to celebrate. We didn't want to celebrate too early either, because there's always the chance that we'd run into some catch during the closing process that would cause us to have to back out. So, quite honestly, like a lot of the excitement, like holy crap, we made it, energy had just turned into stress, waiting a month and a half for this process to complete. But one of the first things that we did when it was something we could talk about was I called up my parents and my in-laws to give them the news, and it was really funny. We have them on Skype. My mother and father-in-law live in Manila, and we called them up and we're like, hey, mom and dad, we've got some great news. And they're like, really? And we're like, yeah. And we told them my company got acquired, and they're like, oh, we thought it was a baby. And they were so disappointed. But you know, we had big plans to celebrate. But honestly, like at that point, like there was so much stress, and we'd been just doing such crazy hours for so long that we didn't end up doing, you know, half of the crazy things that we said we were going to do to celebrate. Ultimately, what we ended up doing is we went and had a really nice dinner. We flew out to Maui to unwind for a month at this house that James was renting, and we went to this fantastic restaurant. And James, being a wine connoisseur, had dug up this 1981 bottle of Chateau something that was the most amazing bottle of wine I've ever had in my entire life, that they had to spend like 10 minutes getting the cork out without the bottle falling apart. And it was fantastic. And that ended up being how we celebrated.
Amazing. So in terms of exit opportunities, acquisition versus IPO or any other types of exits, how would you advise the participants to think about that? When do you choose an acquisition route versus potential an IPO?
You know, if there's a couple different things there, and like one is like knowing, like as far as idea wise, like how much gas you've got in the tank, like how much of your vision that you've completed, because you know you're going to be judged based on where you are and the product that you have today by the people who want to acquire you. And if you know, as we did when we got that, you know, when we got the $20 million offer, the $20 million offer, and the $40 million offer, and the $75 million offer, we knew we were just getting started. We were only like 10% the way through our vision, and we still had our best stuff yet in front of us. So it was really hard to say yes to those because we knew how much further there was to go. And by the time we got the offer from Salesforce, most of what we wanted to build, not all, but most of it was there, and there was lots of refinements that we wanted to do and tweaks that we wanted to do and lots of scaling that we wanted to do. But the general principle of what it was we were trying to build out was at least intact. You could see our vision at that point. So it was a lot less, the value of the acquisition was a lot more in line with the actual vision that we were trying to accomplish rather than just the groundwork that we had laid. And then, the other thing is you have to consider is that it gets harder and harder to get acquired as you get bigger and bigger. The number of companies that want to spend money to acquire you gets fewer and fewer. We were at a point there where when we were getting that offer, we're like, okay, what are all the companies on the planet that would be interested in acquiring us and have enough money that they could acquire us for this amount or more? And there were like 5 companies on the planet that fit that bill. And 4 of those companies we would probably never want to say yes to because we didn't like the way they did business. So that left Salesforce. So we're like, it's probably, it's either yes now or we're going to have to go through to IPO. And you're going to need to be at a valuation in excess of $1 billion to be in a position for that IPO. So we're looking at having to get 4 to 8 times bigger than we were there before we would have the next opportunity to exit. And depending on knowns and unknowns, realistically we're looking at another 2, 3, 4 years of hard work to get to a point where we could take money off the table. So at that point we figured it was the right time to exit. But there's kind of this, it's really easy. If you're getting traction and you're getting people using your platform, it's easy to get acquisition offers, say in the first $50 million, and it gets a little harder up to $100 million, and then between $100 million and $1 billion, it's a bit of a desert. And you're lucky to get acquisition offers, and you got to be willing to either take one of them or push all the way through to IPO.
Roger?
So I mean that covers the scene in the United States very well. The only thing I would add to that for the U.S. is that might be a little more relevant when you're smaller is don't design a company to get acquired. That's a sure way to either fail or have a very small exit. So yeah, I mean, a lot of you hear these stories. You read about companies that sell on TechCrunch, places like that. You might think, oh, I'd love to have a $5, $10, $20 million exit. If you design a company for that, then you'll end up being you won't end up being sort of mission vision driven. Large companies who actually have the spending power to acquire you and even spend $5 or $10 million want to work with vision driven founders. So a $10 or $20 million acquisition is more like a worst case scenario if you try to build a large company and then you sort of end up having to sell. But you shouldn't be consciously thinking about it. I don't think either one of us was thinking about selling our business when we started it. Like I said, when I started to get offers, I rejected them. Same with Orion. On the global scene, I've been to a few events like this and talked to entrepreneurs who've exited. I know that in some countries, IPOs can make more sense on the local markets. In China, for example, there aren't as many acquirers because companies prefer to just sort of build their own. They prefer to clone you. There isn't really a culture of acquisition. So I think their IPOs can be more common, and you can actually IPO at a smaller watermark, maybe 50 to 100 million. So I don't know what exactly it's like in your country, but if you're looking at starting a local business in your country, you'll want to be somewhat versed on that.
And my last question is, you mentioned that when you went from a traditional corporate job to becoming an entrepreneur, there was the money issue, for example, $50,000 versus earning $3,000 a day. In your case, being a very bad minion, you mentioned. Now that you have financial security, what is the drive that motivates you to build the next thing, to work really hard? What is really the inner incentive that you have to try really hard in the future?
I mean, at least for me, like monetary return on this kind of thing has always been a nice thing, but it's never been a primary motivating factor. Like I mean, case in point, I've previous to Heroku, I never made that much money. I had good years, I had bad years, but on average, they averaged out to meh years. But nevertheless, that never really slowed me down or stopped me. I just sort of did what I needed to do, and I ate lots of ramen and sat on a milk crate when I needed to. And I remember when we were looking at the potential acquisition offer, one of the bigger ones, I was chatting with my mom about it, and she was like, well, why would you want to sell your company? I'm like, well, it's a lot of money. If I sold the company for this amount, I'd never have to worry about money again. And my mom laughed and said, Orion, you've never worried about money a day in your life. What are you talking about? I'm like, oh, God, you're right. I haven't. Like, that is kind of a silly thing. So, I mean, ultimately, like, you need to have, and this goes back to my talk yesterday. I was talking about passion and wanting to get change. Like, I think those things are really, really important because, desire to make a lot of money is a powerful extrinsic motivator, but extrinsic motivators run out pretty quick. And they don't really last very well when you're exhausted and when things aren't working well. Like, if you wanna have a successful career, if you want to push a company far, you need to be really passionate about what you're doing for the sake of what you're doing, for the change that you want to make, or for the vision or the art that you're trying to create. And those things still exist. Like, money has always been a minor motivating factor for me, and I still want to make the world a better place. I still have things that creations that I want to bring into the world, and I'd like to leave leave a few footprints on this planet before I go. And those are powerful motivating factors for me. Like, the clock is ticking. I've got 40 some odd years left on this planet, maybe 50 if I'm lucky, and I want to leave as many cool things behind before I go, and that's the powerful motivating factor for me.
It's fantastic. And Roger?
Yeah, I would. I would echo a lot of that. Most of the best entrepreneurs I know didn't become entrepreneurs to make money. They became entrepreneurs because because they had those intrinsic motivators. They had something about the world they wanted to change. Some problem they noticed that they thought they could make better. They became entrepreneurs because they couldn't really do anything else. I've had more people than I can count ask me, "Wow, how do you do what you do? That seems so hard. How did you quit your job? How did you make that leap to start a company?" And I remember when I first started getting asked those questions, it was hard to answer. I'd always be a little confused because that's not the framework I think in. I wanted to turn around and ask them, like, how do you have a job? Like, how do you put up with a boss? Like, how do you deal with, like, someone kind of telling you what to do and not starting your own thing and creating something and changing the world? Because that's what I can't do. That's hard for me. I strongly believe people take the path of least resistance in life, like electrons, right? You just do what's easy for you. Any extrinsic motivators that are pushing you in this direction or that end up running out, and you end up sort of doing what you came to the world to do in the first place. So I don't think entrepreneurship really is like a learned thing. I don't think it's something you become. I think if you're an entrepreneur, you know it. And it doesn't mean you had a lemonade stand when you were a kid or anything like that. You don't have to have been an entrepreneur in a traditional sense before in your life. You will just, like, you will have maybe been a leader in some way. Maybe you're the leader of your soccer team, or you like to lead group projects at school, or you kind of always had some little thing going while you were in junior high or high school. That was life for me. I mean, I learned how to program at a very young age, and I always had some little game that I was making, and I'd always seek out programming competitions. I think one time my dad had to drive me to Oklahoma to enter in some Oklahoma programming competition with adults, and I didn't win. I think I got second or third place, but I was pretty proud of myself because I was like 10 or 11, right? So that you just, if you're an entrepreneur, it's just something you intrinsically are, and that's. I don't know if you'd call that a motivator, but that's what keeps your engine going. So after you have that first exit, you'll probably keep building things for the rest of your life, anyways.
Nice. It's your turn, guys. I'm going to take 3 questions because we don't have a lot of time, and I know you guys want to go back to coding and getting ready for the pitches. Who has the first question? Get up, raise your hand. Oh, there you go. Kenny. And just speak loud.
Thank you so much for coming. You guys give great advice. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Kenny. I have questions to ask you guys. My question is, how do you choose good co-founders? Both of you mentioned a lot about that, and I'm obviously thinking of starting my own business. So choosing good co-founders, I think, is the key.
Yeah, this is a very, very hard thing. So I would argue you don't want to be in a position where you're kind of going around and looking for a co-founder. You want it to be someone you've worked with for a long time in some capacity. There's just so much. There's so much that can break in a co-founder relationship. There's so much that gets strained and gets stressed. When your back is up against a wall, or you have an acquisition offer, and your co-founder wants to take it, but you don't. Things like that. So there's just so much that has to be aligned. Work style, values, power dynamic is a really big one. You don't want to be in an arrangement where there's co-CEOs, where there's kind of a question mark to who should take the business forward. As a startup, your competitive advantage with large companies is that you can move very, very fast. You can be effective. You can make hard decisions. If you're kind of co-captaining the ship with somebody, or there's confusion as to how to move forward, you'll end up actually being less effective. You can end up being less effective than a large company. So you want to choose someone you have a pre-established dynamic with, and it could be somebody from a different walk of life. Maybe it's not somebody technical. Maybe it's not that hacker friend you have. Maybe it's that guy you went to high school with who you really got along with. You had the same values. I'd recommend looking back at your sort of personal network, friend network, maybe professional network, choosing somebody you have a very, very good working style with, and then making sure up front you have all of your values aligned, and take your time. Don't rush into it. Spend a lot of time working with the person first.
Yeah, I would echo that and say that you're really not going to know who a good co-founder is until you've had an opportunity to work with them. And Adam and I met each other in college, and he was I was used to being the smartest person around in high school, and then suddenly being in college, there's all these other smart people around, and Adam was the smartest person I could find. Like, a good trait in a co-founder is someone that you're deeply intimidated by because they're so awesome. And hopefully they're deeply intimidated by you because you're so awesome too. And then that's a good basis for a relationship. But when we met each other, and he was the only person I found who knew tons of stuff that I didn't know about software, and we spent 100 hours a week not going to class and working on a game together all through college. And it was a fantastic experience for finding out that we had an amazing working relationship. We had a great ability to work together. We had complementary strengths. The things that I was awesome at, he was not, and the things that he was awesome at, I was not, and it made us a great team. And then James, we met several years later at BitScribe. He came to work with us for a while as an employee, but we very quickly realized that he was brilliant. He knew tons of stuff about business and art and design that we did not know, and it was immediate within the month that he had no business being an employee of ours, and we invited him to be a co-founder of that company because we had profound respect for what he was doing, and we loved working with him. A good co-founder is someone who, is intimidatingly good at what they do, and you have an excellent working relationship with. And the second half of that, you won't know until you've actually had a chance to work with them. So therein is a good reason to start as many projects as you can and work with as many brilliant, wonderful, amazing people as you can to find out who the people are that you have that connection with.
There's a question over there, guy in a red shirt. Raise your hand again if you have a question, if you still have a question. All right. Guy in the yellow shirt.
Hello. So usually people, when we get an idea, we go to Google or research to see if something similar is there, right? And if we find something similar, we usually start doubting about our idea. So how will you know when to pursue your idea?
Well, I mean, for starters, if you can't find any example of your idea, it's probably because it's not a good idea. Now, that's not always true. I mean, sometimes you can be the first and be successful, but it's really rare. And I come from saying that, where we stumbled on a platform as a service before it was a thing. But like I said, we were almost too early. We almost screwed up if we had done this 6 months earlier, we would have failed tragically. Generally speaking, look to see the other people who are doing your idea, and are they wildly successful? If so, it's a red ocean. There's already blood in the water, and you don't want to get involved. If there's big players who are already doing that very successfully. But if there's little players and they're not doing very well, see if you can figure out why. See if you can understand why it is they're failing in that market, and then what you would do differently to succeed. Because usually what happens is when these markets emerge, when these ideas emerge, 3 or 4 people will try it. They'll do it badly. They'll kind of miss the point, but they'll be close. And if you have the right understanding, if you have that deep understanding of the problem and you can learn from their mistakes and figure out, oh no, if it's just 2 inches over to the right, then they're going to hit the bullseye, and then you can build that company that's similar but succeeds where they fail. And I mean, if you look at MySpace versus Facebook, so similar, but Facebook, ate MySpace's lunch by doing a couple of things much, much better. If Zuckerberg had been like, oh, I can't make a social network because MySpace already exists, that would have been a real shame for him. But there's a book called Blue Market Strategy that kind of talks about this that I would recommend giving a good read, where you can enter a market if there's other people, but as long as they aren't very successful and they aren't very big, and you think you have an edge, you think you can do something to be very successful where the previous entrants had failed.
Do you want to add anything, Roger, or should we move on to the next one?
Yeah, not much to add there. You saw the talks yesterday on ideas. I mentioned a concept around idea timing, looking for a disruptive factor. So in the case of Facebook, the disruptive factor might even have been something as simple as it's cheap to host images, so we should make this more about photos. Facebook is the largest photo sharing site in the world, so that was a big thing for them. They happen to have a disruptive idea for an entry strategy that nobody had really thought of. So they did innovate a little bit. Every successful business is going to innovate a bit on what the competition is doing. At least in the team of people you put together, there's always something you're doing differently that's going to make you successful. But you don't want to be innovating too much. You want to take a lot of elements that are proven and add something disruptive.
I'm pretty sure their innovation was no sparkle text.
No sparkle text. Yeah, that's the one other thing I'd add is I remember being on the Facebook platform. Like I said, I started making apps there around 2007, and I remember every single year there'd be an article somebody would write, some big publication like the Wall Street Journal, where they'd say, oh, this whole Facebook app thing is going to blow over by next year. Or, oh, it's too late to be a new Facebook app company. And sure enough, every year, apps would get bigger and new competitors would enter the market and succeed. So even after there's sort of a disruptive shift and a new market opens up, you have a lot more time than you think. It's not like if you don't get in the first 3 months, you're screwed. You often have 1 to 2 years before everybody else kind of figures it out.
Are there any last questions? Last question over there. Guy with the gray shirt.
Hi, I'm Michael. Right, there's been a lot of talk about speed versus perfection, speed versus quality, and sometimes it's a little difficult to find a balance. It's like a lot of people say that it's very important to get it out fast. It doesn't have to be perfect, but get it out fast before everyone else does it. But on the other hand, if you release a product that it may be the first or among the first, but it's not that great. So how do you find a balance between speed and perfection? When will be the optimum time to release something that could probably be successful, and then after you release, then you need to keep building off that to perfect it. So how do you find that balance? Thank you.
Well, the good news is the definition of release is very fungible. So you're not. It's not like you're building boxed software, right? At least on the internet, and it definitely depends on what business you're in, but at least when making an internet application, you can kind of like release could mean anything from I went on a really small blog and posted a link to I spent $1 million on PR and launched all these press publications, or I spent $1 million on marketing or whatever it is. So I mean, if you read books like Lean Startup and you've looked into that methodology online, you see that what they emphasize is to have a bias for progressive investment. So, I mean, and this is also important for you as an investor because you're progressively investing more and more of your time in the business that you're running. You don't want to put a lot of work into something, make it perfect, and then launch it if you don't know that users really want it. So, take very small baby steps. The first release could be you go to a park and you talk to 10 people about your idea. You should have varying watermarks before you put a lot of investment into something, so you can make sure you're going the right direction.
Yeah, I mean he absolutely agree. Ultimately, you have to do both. You have to release things that are high quality, and you have to release them quickly, and you have to figure out a way to do both of those. But releasing is I really don't think you can release too early. Like just going to the park and talking to people about the idea is a first draft. I think is a fantastic idea. And you have this. You ultimately want to win with not with this water balloon of planning and success, but with this Chinese water torture of continuous improvement. Your product's not going to be successful unless it's really, really good, but you have to get it out and you have to get feedback and you have to be able to hone in on your proper market and your proper product by getting feedback. And most people fail by waiting too long to launch, and most people fail by not getting the thing out there to get feedback, and they build things in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I think to that point, Reid Hoffman had a quote: "If you like your first version, you launch too late." So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. But to Orion's point, quality is definitely important once you kind of have something you know is viable.
Orion, Roger, this was truly insightful and very inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing the stories of Heroku and Mafia Wars with such candor. Guys, let's thank them for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, I'm so very excited about your final product. Today at 3 p.m., you're going to start your pitches. So go back to work. Thank you, guys. Good luck.